Cortical motor neurons send their axons downward through a series of precisely defined anatomical structures. The journey begins in the corona radiata, a broad fan-shaped white matter region where fibers from across the cortex converge. These fibers then funnel into the posterior limb of the internal capsule, a compact, critical structure where motor fibers for the limbs travel in a tightly packed bundle. From there, the fibers continue through the cerebral peduncles at the midbrain level. Then, pass through the ventral pons, and finally through the medulla. These descending fibers collectively form two named tracts, the corticospinal tract, which ultimately targets spinal cord motor neurons to control limb and trunk muscles, and the corticobulbar tract. The corticobulbar tract branches off along the brainstem to control cranial nerve motor nuclei. Together, these two tracts are what we refer to as upper motor neuron fibers. As fibers travel through the diencephalon and brainstem, they send branches to innervate extrapyramidal structures and cranial nerve motor nuclei. The lower brainstem motor neurons receive input from both crossed fibers, meaning signals from the opposite side of the brain, and uncrossed fibers from the same side. This bilateral input is important for most brainstem functions. However, there is one critical exception to this rule. Neurons that control the lower facial muscles receive input predominantly from crossed fibers only, meaning primarily from the opposite hemisphere. This anatomical detail becomes one of the most clinically useful localizing signs in all of neurology. So in summary, the descending corticospinal pathway is the main voluntary motor tract from motor and premotor cortex to spinal lower motor neuron circuits. Most fibers decussate in the medulla to form the contralateral lateral corticospinal tract for limb and fine distal movement, while a smaller anterior corticospinal tract remains uncrossed. The corticobulbar pathway arises mainly from the lateral primary motor cortex, descends with corticospinal fibers to brainstem cranial nerve motor nuclei, and provides bilateral cortical input to the upper face, with the lower facial nucleus being the key exception that is predominantly contralaterally driven. Lesions above the pyramidal decussation usually cause contralateral weakness, whereas lesions below it cause ipsilateral weakness. Compact lesions in the internal capsule can produce dense hemiplegia because corticospinal fibers are tightly packed there. Bulbar signs. Unilateral corticobulbar lesions typically spare the upper face but cause contralateral lower facial weakness. Bilateral corticobulbar involvement can produce dysarthria, dysphagia, bifacial weakness, pseudobulbar affect, or, in severe brainstem injury, locked-in syndrome when corticospinal tracts are also affected. In the next video, we will discuss the internal capsule, genu, versus posterior limb.